Nachi free.
I'd like to reach out to any and all Bernie Sanders supporters with the utmost and sincerest respect, because I think it's a shame that we all can't just get along, especially during this 2016 election year. Though I'm sure we could if more people took the time to understand basic economics. And if they did, they wouldn't be clamoring for socialism. By the way, I'm not a Donald Trump supporter. I'm definitely not a Hillary Clinton supporter. And though I wouldn't say I'm a Bernie hater, I definitely despise what this man stands for. To give you a little perspective as to why, my family's Cuban. And my parents were put into forced labor camps in Cuba back in the late 1960s. And that's that they actually supported this douchebag at first, especially my mom. She, like many well-intentioned Bernie Sanders supporters, thought everything could be free. And she also agreed with the ideas of economic and social justice. My dad, not so much, because he understood history. And he was an accountant. And he realized, hey, wait a minute. These promises don't add up. This smells like a communist dictatorship of ruin. But my mom and quite a few other family and friends thought, hey, let's give it a try. And they quickly discovered that nothing in this life is free. Not healthcare, not education, not even running water. Everything in this life has a cost, especially civilization. And if you think civilization and a modern standard of living is expensive, try living out in the wilderness as a hunter-gatherer. Good luck to you. But if you want to live in a relatively safe, civilized society with an abundance of food and drink that you don't have to give a second thought to why or how they seem to appear out of thin air conditioning for that matter, internet, video games, and a host of other crap that people take for granted, just remember that somebody at some point has to make that happen. It's easy to think that everything should be a right and be for free. It's a whole other matter to materialize them. Now, if it sounds like I'm being condescending or talking to you as a child, that's not my intention. But it boggles my mind how many Bernie Sanders supporters, particularly the ones out in Hollywood and mainstream media outlets who consider themselves to be oh so intellectual, don't seem to get these basic fundamental economic concepts. Ironic considering how many of them are multi-millionaires thanks to corporations and capitalism. There's a great debate video, by the way, which I've linked down below, between Bernie Sanders and Rand Paul in the Senate, and they're discussing the issue of free healthcare. And it's interesting to watch Bernie Sanders deliver a self-righteous sermon on the need for free universal healthcare and giving lip service to an actual doctor like Rand Paul who volunteers his spare time to provide free healthcare to poor people. Yet Bernie Sanders continues attempting to shame Rand Paul for his free market ideology on healthcare, when in reality, Rand Paul is the guy that actually makes it happen. Is Bernie Sanders that naive, or is he just a hypocrite? But my real problem with Bernie Sanders is his undying admiration for a vile, murderous dictator like Fidel Castro, whom he still praises to this day for his free healthcare and the doctors that he sends around the world. How does Bernie Sanders, in his infinite senatorial wisdom, not know that Cuban doctors are basically being treated like indentured servants when they travel abroad to provide free healthcare? Doctors who barely get paid a fraction of their labor, which is far from a living standard, while the Castro regime pockets the rest. Anyway, I'm sorry if I must sound like I'm lecturing and sermonizing, but Bernie Sanders triggers my sense of fear. The fear of having to go through what my family and the entire nation of Cuba went through after believing a bunch of economically impossible promises. Yet I know I don't need to fear Bernie Sanders because he's not going to make it past the primaries anyway. But what I fear is the ideology that he has left behind in his wake, which is surfacing in the form of collective temper tantrums at colleges throughout our country, like what happened this week with protesters who tried to silence Milo's Yiannopoulos at DePaul University in Chicago. And wait for it.
Feel that burn! Feel that burn!
Ah yes, feel the burn. And the not-so-innocent protests at Donald Trump's rallies in New Mexico, which ironically happened on the same day. And I believe on that same day, May 24th, Bernie Sanders said that democracy can get messy, and democracy's not always nice and quiet and gentle, but that's where the Democratic Party should go. Way to stoke the flames of divide, Bernie. This does not make for a peaceful, prosperous, just, and equitable society. Silencing debate, perpetuating a victimhood narrative, spreading even more divide through class warfare, and demanding services as a right and entitlement with no thought or care as to how they're going to materialize. Because it's interesting, the people who demand the most of others are usually the ones that contribute the least. And for anyone who has a problem with Donald Trump's own inflammatory language and his dim-witted schoolyard taunts and his own set of empty promises, then please don't engage in the same behavior. Because you can't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with carefully calculated procedures and equipment that have proven to work. Like this here fire extinguisher. That way you don't get burned. Thanks for watching.
Homegrown